Okay, our next keynoter, very exciting. Like I said, we're gonna hear now about how mobile is transforming industries, and our keynoter is Michael Riegel, the Vice President of Mobile and WebSphere Solutions at IBM. And in his role, he directs the strategy and marketing around the world for all of IBM's mobile and web solutions to advance the company's Smarter Planet strategy. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're going to spend the next kind of 30 minutes talking about mobile and how it's transforming industries. So I think it'll be a pretty engaging discussion. I want to thank Peter, actually, for his words of wisdom. I always appreciate when somebody takes the long view and gives us a perspective on how the industry is changing. And I think he did that pretty well with his opening remarks and then his perspectives on the 3 keys to success, one of which obviously is mobile and how you need to leverage mobile to be successful. I think what's fascinating about mobile is it's very personal to all of us. I will tell you, when I took this job about a month ago, I used to run all of our startup programs around the world for IBM, and I spent a lot of time with startups on mobile. This is the first job in my career where I explained it to my extended family and I didn't have to explain it. I could just say I'm doing mobile and they understood exactly what I meant, unlike the data center job or the managed services job or all those other jobs that we all have in the industry. Mobile is easy to understand, people experience it every day, and it's something that makes for a great discussion with customers for all of us in the industry in terms of how we can help them think about their mobile strategy. Now, as we think about mobile, let me just do a quick survey of the crowd here. How many of you carry a cell phone today? Pretty much everybody, right? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you keep your hand up if you have 2 phones? Look at how many people have 2 phones. Right? We probably have 2 phones because we might have a personal one and we might have a work one, right? Or we might have an Android and an iOS. How many of you have 2 phones and a tablet? Oh boy. How many have 4 devices now? 4? Count the laptop? Okay. Anybody have 5 personally? Because you guys are not eligible to win the next iPad. We're cutting you off, right? But you can see that everybody is embracing mobile. And it's an exciting place for us to really think about how can we help our customers collectively in the industry embrace mobile to drive revenue growth, to drive a different business outcome, and to think about how they can get a competitive advantage within their industry. I'm always looking for those cool examples. So you see up on the screen my Twitter ID, my LinkedIn ID. If you know of cool examples of where people are embracing mobile and transform their industry, I would love to hear about them, because I think the more we collectively share them, the easier it's going to be for people to understand what the art of the possible is with mobile. Now, the interesting thing is that today, all the noise about mobile is about the apps and the devices and the handsets, right? Rich mentioned the fact about how many iPhones were sold in the first weekend. Clearly, that's where all the excitement is today, because that's what we can all relate to today. But the reality is that mobile is transforming the way we spend our time and the way enterprises are thinking about engaging with IT. Everybody has their favorite mobile stats. These just happen to be the most recent 3 that I've come across. The fact that there are going to be more mobile devices than people, when you consider that half the world doesn't have a mobile device, that means most of us have quite a few of them. That means that there is a whole segment of the population that still can embrace mobile across multiple devices. Mobile devices also are the first electronic item that people are keeping with them 24/7. So despite all the other transformations that have happened in the industries, this is the first one where people are keeping it literally within arm's reach 24/7. That dramatically changes how you think about customers. No longer do you have to think about customers engaging with your brand on the web or in the store, either from being in front of a PC or finding your store in a major retail location. It dramatically changes how you think about your employee productivity. Employees no longer log on, log off from work, right? Most employees have work with them 24/7. How does that change the nature of work for what we do in our companies, for how we empower them from an IT perspective, and how we manage and lead them from a leadership perspective within our organizations that we all lead? And CIOs obviously are stuck responding to all of this. And you can see that because of all the pressure on CIOs, 74% believe that they're going to do something with mobile this year. And in fact, many of them already are. And we're helping thousands and thousands of customers embrace mobile, everything from changing the network strategy to embracing bring your own device to creating new apps to transforming their entire business around mobile. So let's dive into that a little bit. What are CIOs thinking about? So if you look at what the data that's on the chart, there's two that jump out there to me. Number one is that 77% are going to let us use our own devices, so we don't have to keep carrying multiple phones. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? They're going to let us have access. They're going to empower employees to do bring your own device and enable the deployment of company data and company applications onto the mobile devices of your choice. So that's a good sign for all of us. The one that's also striking me, though, is the one that's in the middle, around 25 plus apps. I don't know how many of you are in application development, but if my boss came to me when I was in app dev and said, we're going to have 25 net new apps next year, I would not quite sure where to start. That is an enormous task that is very, very different for an IT department to deal with, to think about how you would deploy 25 plus apps. Now, as you all know, apps are different in the mobile space, right? They tend to be simpler. They tend to be built for task, simple purpose. They rely heavily on great user interface design, and it's an area where, frankly, there aren't enough skills. Most companies I talk to say that they can't find the skills, and they're turning to kind of boutique mobile app development shops. Or they're turning to large systems integrators like IBM or some of our competitors who have aggregated enough skill in these types of spaces. And so the challenge is, how do we embrace mobile amidst all these pressures in a way that really drives our business forward? Not surprisingly, there's a lot of concerns about how to do that. There's concerns about the fragmentation of devices. How do I create an application strategy for apps for my business that support all the devices that are out there? It's incredibly challenging. We actually bought a company called Worklight that lets you do that, where you write code one time, you can deploy it across a whole range of operating systems, the latest iOS and the upcoming Windows release of an operating system next year. But this is a big challenge, because not only do you need to think about the fragmentation of devices, you need to think about how application development is different in the mobile world. The life cycles are much faster, literally weeks of iterations, right? It takes Agile and puts it on steroids to really do application development well out in the mobile world. And not only is application development different, but the distribution model is different, because now you have to think about how are you going to distribute your applications through stores? How are you going to create an internal store for your employees that might be different than an external store that you use to your customers? And you need to think differently about security as well, because you've got to think about application security out on the mobile device. You've got to think about network security and authentication. You've got to think about security of the back-end data. One of the biggest challenges in mobile application development is how do you get at the data that you want for that simple smartphone app? And so it really forces our customers collectively to think about, if you can't answer these three questions, you kind of do not pass go. You really have to step back and think about these approaches and how they're different for mobile. Now, not surprisingly, CEOs really want to get into the game. And when you ask CEOs where they're prioritizing mobile, it's pretty clear if you look at the data, right? It's absolutely an overwhelming number one focused on customers. And this is from our recent CEO survey, where we survey 1,700 CEOs around the world. We sit down with them face-to-face and have the discussion as part of our work with them. And they made it overwhelmingly clear that mobile and business analytics are the biggest things they're worried about, and they're focused primarily on the customer side of that. Read that as not always the employee side. Employee side fits into the operations model, which is the second one, and then arming their sales teams and driving sales productivity is the third one. So it's clearly on the minds of our CEOs that we work with, and it's something that we really need to embrace. And the reason it's on their mind is because they're seeing statistics around what mobile can do. And so I gave you one example here of the transformation that mobile is driving in retail commerce. And what the statistics actually show you is that customers who consume information on a tablet will buy more. So you see the 21% will buy more than those who consume on a computer. Not too surprising. Imagery is better, right? Graphics are better. It's usually a better user experience. So customers will spend more. What's even more interesting, though, is they will spend more than traditional visitors in the store as well. And so now, if you're in the retail space, you have to dramatically rethink the amount of resource that you have on store location, on store design, on store presence, all the art and science that goes into retail about how you lay out the store for maximum customer value and retention, all that has to be transformed and thought about now in the tablet world if you're in retail. And by the way, most customers don't have nearly as much resource on tablet thinking and mobile thinking as they do on all of that retail store design. So this is one example of the type of data that we're seeing around transformation of an industry and how retail is being reshaped simply by tablets and the amount of transactions that are happening in that model. Now, for my old job running the startup program, here's another example. And you could probably call this kind of the public health version of my speech. If you're like me and you grew up doing anything outside before skin cancer was a well-known thing, or if you're a lifeguard like I was, you probably worry a little bit about what your skin is like. If you go to this site, skinscanapp.com, they're a breakthrough company transforming medical treatment for skin care and skin cancer. What you can do is download the app for free. You can use the camera on your phone to take a picture of any part of your skin that you might be worried about, automatically send it in and get a free diagnosis on the potential likelihood of cancerous cells. All part of the model for free. And then if you want more advanced follow-up, you pay $10 and they connect you to a second opinion for a doctor and they plug you into a doctor network. So another example of how healthcare, different industry, being transformed by a startup, in this case SkinScan, skinscanapp.com is the site, IBM startup partner who's doing cool things around healthcare to transform how we think about it. Now I want to go a little more in-depth to a more traditional example with a company called TBC. TBC is the nation's largest retailer of tires. If you've ever been to a tire merchant or a big O Tire or Tire King, any of those stores, they're all part of the conglomerate known as TBC. And TBC is headquartered down in Florida, and they actually saw mobile as an inflection point for how they wanted to rethink their business. And so what's interesting about what TBC did is they didn't start by just coming up with an app, which is where most people start. They started by rethinking the customer experience that they wanted to have as a brand. Not just the customer experience in the store, the customer experience they wanted to have as a brand. And what this chart shows you is the work that they did as a leadership team with the C-suite executives to think about how they could dramatically change the perception of their brand, NTB in this case, one of their subsidiaries, to dramatically improve it. And the axes are very simple. It's expensive, inexpensive, utility, joyful. And you can see where they perceive themselves, which was getting tires as a utility, and it has zero joy. I can understand that. That's about how I think about when I need to pay for more tires. And you see over there in the left-hand quadrant a lot of other companies that they went out to and talked to about where they were perceived. So Chevron is down there, gas stations, other types of things like that. And they wanted to get to being a place where there's more customer value provided so they could move to the right. And they didn't have a huge investment budget, so they wanted to think about how could I do something inexpensive to make the experience of dealing with our company more joyful and have higher utility for my customers. That was the starting point. And so as they went through that discussion, what they did is they had to rethink the in-store experience. And they had to rethink the process that they engage with the customer. And if you hear their CIO talk about it, what he'll say is, we had to rethink getting away from the greasy counter. Because you walk into most tire stores and you deal with the salesperson behind the counter, and it's a greasy counter, and there's paperwork around, and nobody likes the coffee in the tire store anyway. And so you're just kind of hanging out waiting for your tires to be done. And it's just not a good situation for customer loyalty and customer brand. And tires are a commodity, and now you can get tires at Walmart, and you get tires on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we change that experience? How do we rethink that experience? And what they started to hone in on, and you see this a little bit in the drawings that they were generous enough to let me take a copy of, is the frustration customers really have in the store is they don't know what to do. So when the guy comes out and says, well, yeah, you need new brakes, new struts, new tires, most consumers don't actually know, should they do that or not? Can they wait? Can they sit on the tires for a little bit while they fix the brakes? Right? So the process of making a recommendation from them to the customer and the customer being informed about the trade-off options was the critical moment where customers then begin to think about, do I trust this brand or not? And I don't know about you all, but I can name the car shops in my hometown where I went in for one thing and they tried to sell me 10 more. And I'm smart enough to know that I didn't need all 10. Right? And so that's the dynamic that they're dealing with at NTC. So they had to rethink the customer experience, and they wanted to change the dynamic of how they give that advice in a consultative, trustworthy way to customers to drive up that brand experience and that brand loyalty. And so what you can see they got to is a tablet app that does a visual explanation of the dynamics of what's happening on the car. So now they're taking the technology around mobile, the technology around tablets, they're using the high resolution kind of picture format to make it easier for the customer to understand the different dynamics about what needs to be fixed on the car. And you can see that there's the learn more piece there, a couple other buttons there that make it very, very simple for the customer to understand the core problem of what's happening on the automobile. What's interesting is they also recognize this question for customers is always about, do I have to do it or not? What's the risk if I don't do it? And what you see here is they started to sketch out this cost and risk analysis to help customers think through what's the cost if I do nothing, what's the cost if I kind of repair it, what's the cost if I replace it completely, and help the customer think through both the financial model of that and the long-term model of what it might do to their automobile, which is the critical question that most customers really want to get to. And so you can see that this is not about just starting with the app. This is not about just starting with how do I support multiple operating systems. It started for them and ended with an application like this, where they're able to provide a totally different experience in the store by consulting with the customer, helping them understand the trade-offs, and frankly, becoming a trusted advisor to the customer as opposed to someone trying to sell tires or batteries or brakes. So a pretty cool app. And if you think about what they went through, they really had to rethink how to transform their business model. And if you looked at that app closely on the last chart, what you'll see is there are actually a lot of other service features in there where they're now starting to become a service model to the customer as opposed to a retail tire seller. And they've retrained their sales staffs in the store. They've retrained their technical staffs to really give a much more holistic view of how they can provide consultative service for the long term to these customers. And the results are very promising. They are absolutely seeing customers return for a relationship as an ongoing way for them, which was a big issue. And so they transformed from being a simple retailer of tires to being someone who provides service through a mobile model that the customer can have on their own on their own mobile or on the one that they give them in the store. So I think a pretty interesting example of how somebody is transforming by leveraging mobile and thinking about it more holistically. Now, the other cool thing about mobile is that it has some unique features that we're going to be able to take advantage of in the months and years ahead. And they provide some unique opportunities for us to innovate together in the industry to really change the nature of applications. So GPS is the obvious one. The reality is most applications today don't use GPS very well. You think about GPS, you should know, you can tell where the customer is at any given time. Wouldn't it be nice if when I'm walking into the airport, it knows that I'm walking into the airport, and rather than when I open my American Airlines app to the front page, it actually takes me right to my boarding pass? Wouldn't that be nice? That's possible today if you design the proper type of application. I'm going to give you some examples of customers that are doing that well. Near-field communications is a hot topic. You know, the fact that Apple didn't put it in the latest phone is a choice they made. But clearly it's an area where it's going to provide the technology that we need to really leverage for exchange of information, whether that be ticketing or payment or simple contact information, and gives us the unique opportunity to do that in a frictionless way. And then the bottom two, which are PhD level words, the accelerometers and the microbolometers, say them fast and you'll start to get the hang of it, right? They're actually giving us the ability to think about the speed that someone is moving, the tilt of a device, right? And the infrared technology lets us be able to identify things based on heat or photographs, right? So you can imagine that if you had a good device application for doing this, you could actually figure out where the shortest line is in the checkout store, right? Simple idea, but something very, very hard to do unless you design the application in the right way. So as we devise mobile applications that are going to transform industries, the ones that take advantage of more of these cool, unique mobile features will be the ones that provide the best experience and the biggest breakthroughs industry by industry. Now, it's not just the cool features that are key. The other thing that we talk with customers a lot about is that it requires a lot more thinking than just the app. So as you saw in the example we just talked about on tires, they had to really rethink their business process. They had to start from scratch about what the customer experience was going to be, and they had to reimagine that customer experience. Now, the other pieces of this that's interesting is that you can begin to leverage real-time data when you start doing mobile applications. So as an example, one of the other companies that IBM has acquired is called Tealeaf. If you remember the browser wars in the web days, the big thing was analyzing when the customer abandons their shopping cart on the web. Right? That was kind of the big thing in the days of e-commerce when the web first came out. And there were a whole bunch of analytics technologies to do that. The same is now true for mobile. The technology that Tealeaf has gives you real-time analytics about how users are actually using your mobile application. And it can feed those real-time analytics to you so that you can adjust your application, you can adjust the offers, you can adjust the linkage to the web if you have a hybrid app that's deployed to the web as well. And so leveraging the real-time information, either as simple about the GPS and where people are, or as complex as what's happening inside the application, how can you learn from that user experience in real time and change the behavior that you create with the customer? Great example of what you can do to leverage real time. And then there's also different ways to leverage security. So let me give you a simple example, right? Today, most of us have to sign on to our phone or our tablet. We also then often have to sign in to corporate security systems for either VPN, or we have to sign in many cases, to our email system. Oftentimes, you have to sign in to the application on the phone as well. And there's lots of layers of basically simple password security that are somewhat redundant. Think about it differently. Think about if you leverage GPS information and you leverage some of the spatial information and the network information, think about how this would be possible. You're a nurse. You're in the emergency room. You've got a phone or a tablet that is enabled with your the health medical records in the system. Wouldn't it be nice if you knew that that nurse is inside the four walls of the hospital, that nurse is on the corporate network, she's already authenticated because she signed into her phone, and therefore, when she brings up a medical record on her phone, you should give her unfiltered access instantly. But when she's down the street at Starbucks and she's not on the corporate network anymore, and she's not inside the four walls of the hospital, and she goes to look at a patient record, you're going to require a different level of authentication. Great simple example of what's possible now for mobile applications if you leverage some of the mobile unique features and you rethink some of the business process around it. In the first case, you want her to have access as quickly as she can to a medical record. It's important for how she serves customers. She might be dealing with an emergency inside the hospital. In the second case, she's down the street at Starbucks. Not so sure I want rapid access, right? She's probably looking up, working on some paperwork or doing something to check on a patient, but she's in a less secure setting. That type of different security model is now possible with mobile if you think through how to do that and use it to transform your applications and the model that you're at. Now, Air Canada is another example. Air Canada is a customer we spent a lot of time working with to deploy their airline app. What's interesting about Air Canada, anybody use the Air Canada mobile app? No one? Okay. So Air Canada has a pretty good app. They're getting a lot of kudos for it across the industry. The primary driver for them wasn't just flight information and the simple apps that a lot of the airlines are doing. They wanted to really drive it for self-check-in. And self-check-in that reduces their costs by 80% over when somebody walks into the airport and does some form of a kiosk or something else. But the challenge of self-check-in is you have to have a seamless experience between the web, because some customers will print their boarding pass on the web, a seamless experience on the phone, a seamless experience on the kiosk in the actual airport, as well as what's on the terminals for the agent to see. Not surprisingly, most airlines are not set up to provide that seamless experience. Those are oftentimes different systems. Many of them have completely different web reservation systems still today. And so the real challenge for them to get to this 80% cost reduction was, how do I architect my back end differently? Because the hardest part of that seamless user experience isn't so much the application side and the user design, it's actually getting to a similar set of data at the back end. And I don't know about you all, but when I sit in the airlines, I fly into LaGuardia a lot. Depending on the airline I'm on, it's kind of funny. I will often know more about my flight than the gate agent, right? Because you'll know it's delayed on your phone if it's a good airline app long before the gate agent ever does. And a couple times I've actually told them to go check, right? Because they just don't have the same operational efficiency that some of the mobile apps do, right? So that's another example. Now Visa is another interesting example. A lot of discussion about Visa from the payment network system, but what's really interesting about what Visa is doing in mobile is they're working with their clients to rethink how they can provide more value to their retail customers. So in this case, they're working with the Gap. And what the Gap wanted to understand is there's all this buzz about GPS positioning and how you can use it in the retail environment, in the mall. And what Gap wanted to pilot was, how can I push a coupon to an individual who I know is near a store? There's a lot of buzz about this in the media. Very few companies have actually done it. It's kind of been one of those, I'd love to do it, I'd like to know how to do it, but I don't know how. Well, Visa has figured it out, and they piloted it with Gap. And so what they have done is that when somebody is approaching being within a certain radius of a Gap store, Visa will actually push them a coupon to use their Visa card and get a discount at the Gap. What's the outcome? Gap sales, based on this, up 110% through mobile. 110%. So Gap went from having not very much of a mobile presence, not leveraging mobile data, to now having a demographic audience who uses mobile all the time and is now receiving coupons in certain geographic markets when they're near a store to use their Visa card and get a discount. Great for Gap, great for the customer, even better for Visa, they're driving up the transaction volumes. And they were able to do that all together, working with IBM and our app design systems, our app design teams, as well as our consulting teams. Now another traditional industry being transformed, construction. Not one I would have naturally thought of. VCC is a mid-sized construction firm that was experiencing kind of the pains of the downturn in construction. And what they really started to think about was, if the market's going down, how do we enable our sellers and our people who do the bids and the quotes to be faster at responding to a company project? And what they had to do is they had to rethink their business process to think about, rather than having a sales rep who goes out and talks to a customer, understands the parameters of the bid, walks back to the office the old-fashioned way, sits in a conference room with a bunch of designers, goes down the hall, thinks through all the materials that they need, goes down the hall, talks to the architects, and eventually puts all this bid back together. How can they push all of that out to the field so that they get better intake on data in the field and are able to turn around very quickly a bid to that end prospect? And when they did that, they didn't start with the app. They started with rethinking the business process and the business problem. When they did that, they got to this 40% increase in business. And their customers would tell them it's because they were able to capture more insight in the field at the first place that they were able to turn a bid around very quickly. Capturing that more insight required the use of different business process, different prospecting, different sales training, and different analytics. So a good example of a construction firm embracing mobile to transform how their sellers work and changing the business process on the back end to make them more successful. So the key to all of this, as you can see, is how do you change the nature of engagement with clients, embracing mobile, and turn it into transactions? So whether it be Air Canada changing the nature of engagement with their customers, whether it be tire company thinking about how they change the nature of the experience in the store, whether it be Visa and Gap changing the nature of engagement with their customers through a mobile app, or whether it be VCC changing the nature of how their sellers engage, the key is converting that engagement into transactions. And that's going to be the holy grail for mobile. It's not about the apps and the excitement about the next version of the phone. In fact, in many ways, that harkens back to the way e-commerce was in the web, where everybody was talking about the fastest PC and the web browser. Is it going to be Netscape or AOL or Yahoo, right? We're in the early days of mobile in the same way, and that the hype is about the tools. The hype is going to go in the second phase to being about the outcomes. And I think from these examples, what you've seen is that there are some early market adopters who are taking advantage of this mobile platform and how they can transform industries. And I'm not going to go through a bunch of products, but what I will tell you is that we're helping thousands of customers achieve the types of business outcomes you see here. So whether it's securing devices and making sure that the devices you allow in your corporate network are secure, whether it's designing the new breakthrough application that you need using our design consulting services, whether it's rethinking your customer experience or your brand experience, right, and changing how you're going to drive different customer satisfaction, whatever it is, we have a whole range of products and services to help customers do just that. And we're looking to add a lot of partners to this as well. So if you're working in this space and you want to partner with IBM, we would love to have you join our ecosystem. This is the next big revolution. Clearly, it's going to go for the next 5 to 10 years. We think it's going to be one of the most transformative things that's happened in a long time. And I'm hoping that together, we can leverage mobile to build a smarter planet. Thank you all.